You think you know people, but you're only seeing the surface. Because every person is carrying invisible baggage, and Freud's psychological insights will teach you how to decode it. This isn't surface-level people reading. It's understanding the hidden forces that drive every human being. This video breaks down into 3 powerful parts, each revealing deeper layers of the human psyche. If you skip ahead, you'll miss the foundation that makes this truly work. Stay with me, because by the end, you won't just understand others. You'll understand the invisible patterns running your own life. From childhood, you're taught to trust what people say. But Freud showed us something revolutionary. Most of human behavior isn't driven by conscious choice. It's driven by forces we don't even know exist. The person who just doesn't like certain people, they're not making a rational choice. They're not making a calm, logical judgment. They're running on hidden scripts buried deep in the mind. And the one who always has to be right, that's not confidence speaking. It's armor, forged to protect a wound so deep they've forgotten it's even there. Here's what changes everything. People don't act from who they are. They act from who they were forced to become. Most people believe they're making conscious, rational decisions. But Freud discovered that's an illusion. The unconscious mind, that vast repository of forgotten memories, buried emotions, and survival patterns, is actually running the show. When someone says, "I don't know why I did that," they're telling you the literal truth. Most of our actions come from buried motivations we've never examined. The manager who micromanages isn't trying to be controlling. They're unconsciously recreating a childhood dynamic where they felt powerless. The person who overshares with strangers isn't attention-seeking. They're trying to fulfill an unmet need for connection they can't even name. Watch for the moments when people surprise themselves, when they overreact to minor criticism, when they make choices that go against their stated values, when they can't explain their sudden mood changes. That's the unconscious speaking, revealing the deeper patterns that govern their lives. Everyone has psychological armor that we don't see or don't know how to see it, but Freud tells us not how to recognize the armor, but also how to dismantle it. Here's what most people miss. These defense mechanisms aren't character flaws. They're survival strategies that once kept someone safe, now running automatically in adult life. Take projection. When someone constantly accuses others of being dishonest, they're often projecting their own relationship with truth. It's not conscious hypocrisy. It's an unconscious way of dealing with something they can't face in themselves. The person who sees enemies everywhere is often defending against their own aggressive impulses. Or consider deflection through humor. The person who turns every serious conversation into a joke isn't trying to be annoying. They learned early that humor was the safest way to navigate emotional intensity. Now it's automatic, a protective reflex they don't even realize they're using. Repression shows up when people forget important commitments, especially ones that make them uncomfortable. The friend who constantly cancels plans isn't necessarily unreliable. They might be unconsciously avoiding situations that trigger anxiety or shame they can't consciously acknowledge. Once you recognize these patterns, you stop taking them personally. You see past the armor to the person underneath, trying to feel safe in a world that once taught them they weren't. Here's one of Freud's most profound and heartbreaking discoveries. People unconsciously repeat their earliest painful experiences, hoping this time will be different. It's called repetition compulsion, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. The woman who keeps choosing emotionally unavailable partners isn't unlucky in love. She's unconsciously drawn to what feels familiar, recreating the dynamic with her distant father, hoping that this time, she can earn the love that was withheld. The man who starts fights in every relationship isn't sabotaging happiness. He's unconsciously testing whether this person will abandon him like others did, getting the rejection over with on his terms. This isn't masochism or poor judgment. It's the unconscious mind's attempt to master an old trauma. The child who felt powerless in chaos might become an adult who unconsciously creates chaos, because at least then they're in control of when the other shoe drops. When you see someone making the same mistakes repeatedly, attracting the same type of toxic friend, ending up in the same work conflicts, having the same arguments in every relationship. Don't judge their intelligence. Recognize their unconscious attempt to heal something that's been broken for a very long time. The pattern isn't the problem. The pattern is pointing to the original wound that needs attention. If you've been paying attention, you've probably started noticing it, the way people's unconscious minds leak through their behavior. But now we go deeper into how these patterns get formed and why they persist long after they've stopped serving us. Because Freud understood something most people never realize. Your personality isn't who you are, it's who you had to become to survive. Every child is a genius at adaptation. They quickly learn what gets them love, attention, and safety, and what brings criticism, abandonment, or danger. These survival strategies work brilliantly in childhood, which is why they stick. But they often become prisons in adult life. The child who learned to be perfect to earn love becomes the adult who can't handle any criticism, no matter how gentle. Their nervous system still interprets feedback as a threat to their very survival. The child who learned to disappear during family conflict becomes the adult who avoids all confrontation, even when standing up for themselves is necessary. The child who had to be strong for everyone else becomes the adult who can't ask for help, even when they're drowning. The child who is praised only for achievements becomes the adult whose self-worth depends entirely on external success, never feeling good enough no matter what they accomplish. These aren't conscious choices. They're encoded patterns, running automatically beneath awareness. The person isn't choosing to be a people pleaser or a perfectionist or a control freak. They're being driven by a part of themselves that's still trying to keep a vulnerable child safe. Understanding this changes everything. When someone's behavior seems irrational or self-destructive, look for the child inside who once needed that strategy to survive. That intensity isn't about the present situation. It's about the original wound that created the pattern. Freud discovered that unresolved childhood emotions don't disappear. They get frozen in time, creating what he called fixations. Part of the person's emotional development stops, and they remain stuck at the age when the trauma occurred. The adult who hoards money with desperate intensity might have part of their psyche frozen at age 7, when their family lost everything and they felt the terror of scarcity. The successful executive who still needs constant reassurance might have part of themselves stuck at age 5, when they never felt truly seen or valued by their parents. When someone's emotional reaction seems disproportionate to the situation, you're likely witnessing a fixation. The rage over a minor slight, the panic over a small change, the desperate need for control in situations that don't require it. These aren't adult responses. They're the reactions of a younger self who once felt overwhelmed and powerless. This is why logic doesn't work with emotional wounds. You can't reason with a terrified 5-year-old, even when they're living in a 35-year-old's body. The healing happens when that younger part finally feels heard, validated, and safe. Every new person you meet gets filtered through the unconscious filing system of everyone you've known before. Freud called this transference, the way we unconsciously transfer feelings, expectations, and patterns from past relationships onto current ones. When someone instantly dislikes you for no apparent reason, you probably remind their unconscious of someone who hurt them. Your voice, your mannerisms, something about your energy triggers an old wound, and they react to you as if you were that person. It's not about you at all. It's about their internal world projecting onto yours. The same thing happens with instant attraction or idealization. When someone puts you on a pedestal immediately, you're likely filling a role they needed but never got. The perfect parent, the ideal friend, the rescuer they always hoped would come. But no real person can live up to a fantasy, which is why these intense connections often crash just as quickly as they formed. Understanding transference frees you from taking other people's reactions personally. Their response to you is information about their inner world, not a reflection of your worth. And recognizing your own transference patterns helps you see people as they actually are, instead of as echoes of your past. Here's something beautiful Freud noticed. People transform their deepest pain into their greatest gifts. He called this sublimation, the unconscious process of channeling difficult emotions and experiences into creative, productive, or meaningful pursuits. The lawyer fighting for social justice might be transforming childhood experiences of powerlessness. The artist creating beauty from darkness might be sublimating their own journey through depression. The therapist helping others heal might be working through their own family trauma. The teacher nurturing young minds might be giving to others what they never received. This isn't conscious strategy. It's the psyche's natural tendency to find meaning in suffering, to transform wounds into wisdom. When you see someone with intense passion for a cause, look deeper. Often, they're not just fighting for others. They're healing their own wounds by preventing others from experiencing the same pain. Sublimation is how we turn our biggest liabilities into our greatest assets. The sensitivity that made childhood painful becomes the empathy that makes someone an extraordinary healer. The rebellious nature that caused problems in school becomes the innovation that changes industries. Your greatest wound might be pointing toward your greatest gift. By now, you're starting to see it. The invisible forces shaping every interaction. But we're going to the deepest level now, to the patterns that create patterns, the core wounds that drive all the defenses. This is where Freud's insights become truly transformational. Because once you see these final patterns, you don't just understand behavior, you understand the human condition itself. Behind every adult personality is a child who made life-altering decisions based on limited information and overwhelming emotions. These weren't rational conclusions. They were survival adaptations made by a developing mind, trying to make sense of experiences that were often confusing, frightening, or traumatic. The adult who never trusts anyone is still the child who was betrayed by the people who were supposed to protect them. The one who gives constantly but never asks for anything is still the child who learned that love had to be earned through perfect behavior. The person who avoids intimacy at all costs is still the child who learned that getting close to people meant getting hurt. These core beliefs about life, love, safety, and worth get formed in childhood and then run automatically for decades. The person isn't consciously choosing to be suspicious or self-sacrificing or avoidant. They're being driven by conclusions their child mind made about how the world works. This is why healing isn't just about changing thoughts or behaviors. It's about reaching that wounded child inside and helping them feel what they needed to feel then: safety, love, validation, protection. Until that happens, the adult will keep using childhood strategies in an adult world. One of Freud's most powerful insights: whatever we try to bury in our unconscious will eventually find a way to surface. The emotions we refuse to feel will show up as physical symptoms. The truths we won't admit will slip out in our behavior. The parts of ourselves we reject will appear in our relationships. Nothing stays buried forever. The grief that was handled perfectly after a loss might emerge years later as depression that seems to come from nowhere. The anger that was never allowed expression might surface as passive-aggressive behavior that damages every relationship. The creativity that was crushed in childhood might return as a midlife crisis demanding artistic expression. This is why people sometimes act in ways that surprise even them. The controlled person who suddenly explodes. The people pleaser who abruptly becomes selfish. The pessimist who falls into unexpected love. These aren't personality changes. They're the return of repressed parts of the self, demanding attention. Recognizing this pattern helps you understand that healing isn't linear. Sometimes getting better looks like falling apart, because the buried material has to come up before it can be integrated. The breakdown is often the breakthrough. This changes everything about how you see psychological struggles. Freud showed that what we call problems are actually the psyche's attempted solutions to deeper conflicts. Every symptom serves a function, even when it causes suffering. Anxiety might be the mind's way of staying hypervigilant after trauma, still trying to prevent something terrible from happening again. Depression might be anger turned inward, or the psyche's way of shutting down when the emotional load becomes unbearable. Addiction might be an attempt to medicate pain that feels too overwhelming to face directly. Even seemingly destructive behaviors often serve a protective function. The person who sabotages every good relationship might be unconsciously protecting themselves from the vulnerability that comes with real intimacy. The workaholic might be avoiding the stillness where difficult emotions would surface. This doesn't mean symptoms should be celebrated or ignored. It means they should be understood as messengers, pointing towards something that needs attention. When you stop fighting the symptom and start listening to what it's trying to protect or express, real healing becomes possible. Freud discovered something that changed psychology forever. Simply putting experiences into words, in the presence of someone who listens without judgment, has profound healing power. He called it the talking cure, and it remains the foundation of therapy today. There's something transformational that happens when the stories we've carried in isolation finally get witnessed by another human being. The shame begins to lift. The confusion starts to clear. The pain that seemed unbearable becomes manageable when it's shared. This is why people are drawn to those who can truly listen. Deep listening doesn't just feel good. It literally helps reorganize psychological material that's been stuck. When someone tells their story and feels truly heard, something shifts in their unconscious processing. The experience moves from being stuck in their body and begins to heal. You don't have to be a therapist to offer this gift. Some of the most healing conversations happen between friends, family members, or even strangers who can simply witness another person's truth without trying to fix, judge, or change it. You're not the same person who started this video. You now have a map to the human psyche, not just others, but your own. You can see past behavior to the wounds underneath, past personality to the child who had to adapt to survive. This isn't about becoming an amateur psychologist. It's about developing compassion for the human condition. Because when you understand that everyone is carrying invisible wounds, still trying to get childhood needs met, still defending against old pain, judgment becomes impossible. You don't see difficult behavior anymore. You see strategies that once made sense. You don't see personality flaws. You see adaptations that serve a purpose. You don't see enemies. You see fellow travelers on the healing journey. All of us trying to feel safe and loved in a world that doesn't always provide either. Freud's greatest gift wasn't his specific theories, many of which have evolved or been updated. His greatest gift was showing us that there's always more going on than meets the eye. Every person you meet is deeper, more complex, and more wounded than they appear. And behind their defenses is usually a child who just wanted to be seen, accepted, and loved. Now you can see them, really see them, not to gain power over them, but to offer the understanding they've been searching for their whole lives. And in doing so, you might just find the healing you've been seeking too. If this video helped you understand someone in your life, including yourself, let me know in the comments. Share which insight hit you the hardest. Because the more we understand about the human psyche, the more connected we all become. And remember, these insights are meant to increase compassion, not enable analysis of others without their consent. The deepest healing happens when we turn this understanding inward, becoming curious about our own patterns rather than trying to fix or control others.